Has any progress been made in bringing an end to Russia's war on Ukraine? Yesterday, President Trump said,
"We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin,
and
I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something."
But he said something later that has people wondering if he really is making progress.
And joining us is ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers. Karen, the president also said yesterday that this is something along the lines of a European situation. Are some people taking that as a sign that he wants Europe to deal with this and he's kind of done?
Well, he certainly has wanted Europe to deal with this. He's made that very clear in terms of, providing security for Ukraine and guarantees after the war could end. But yesterday, the president, kind of said things that were on all sides of the spectrum at this point. He said, that he would still be engaged in this. He was asked blank, is he backing away from the negotiations? And he said, no, no, no. But at the same time was saying things like, this is not my war, and signaling that the U.S. would walk away from the talks and let this become Ukraine and Russia trying to figure it out. That's not something that's new from the administration. We've heard the vice president, secretary of state say that for weeks now, that there would be a point where the U.S. could back away. But again, yesterday, the president was asked flat out if they were doing that, or if they were considering that. And he said, no, not at this point.
It's interesting because Vladimir Putin has been grabbing little bits and pieces of the former USSR for quite a while now. I think since, 2008. He's grabbed land in Georgia, parts of Ukraine, in Moldova. He grabbed Crimea in 2014, and really there was no squawking. And, did that just sort of embolden him when nobody really said anything or did anything?
Perhaps. I don't want to speak as an expert on, Russia over the last decade, but I think right now what the president is saying is important about the potential concessions. Would Russia give up any territory? Would they give up what they have kind of taken over in the last 3 years since this war against Ukraine began? And there was no indication yesterday from the president's comments and from his official readout of the call that he was pushing Putin to make concessions. In fact, almost seemed to be the opposite of that. And this has been a frustration to European countries and, of course, to President Zelensky of Ukraine, that they say Ukraine has agreed to a full, unconditional 30-day ceasefire, and Vladimir Putin hasn't budged on what he is willing to give up.
We were talking with ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers, and I suppose one of the best signs of whether or not President Trump is backing off and trying to end the war in Ukraine is asking this question. Are more high-level talks planned, either between President Trump and Vladimir Putin or Trump and Ukraine's Zelensky?
The president said that Ukraine and Russia will now immediately begin negotiations. He did not say if that would be Zelensky and Putin. There was no indication from Russia or Ukraine that the two leaders would now be sitting down. And remember, the two sides did meet late last week in Turkey. That was the first time that Russia and Ukraine have engaged in negotiations directly since this all began. So yesterday, the president saying that they're going to now begin negotiations, it's not clear how different that was from what happened last week. If this is going to be a higher level, we have to wait and see. He also said that the Vatican could be a site for these negotiations to take place. The Pope had offered that up as a neutral site of sorts, not necessarily that he would be doing the negotiating, but again, nothing has been scheduled, and it's not clear that this would be at the leader level or this is just more talks below that from diplomats.
ABC News White House correspondent Karen Travers with us here on KTAR. And, it's one of those frustrating things where you think maybe there's a little bit of progress and then Putin just digs in his heels and he's not doing anything.
Yeah, I've heard somebody say something to the effect of Putin is like Lucy with the football. And the rest of the world is Charlie Brown, right? Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's the way it feels. And again, he's taken over little bits and pieces of the former USSR, which makes you think, is Vlad trying to get the band back together? And I think the answer is yes.
Thanks for watching Arizona's Morning News. Click to watch more from KTAR News and hit the button in the middle to subscribe.